Warning: the following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. This documentary is not to try and make you vegan. This documentary was made on Windows Movie Maker, the most basic of video editing software, so sound may dip in and out sometimes, and lots of interviews were done on location, so may have some demo or loud noises in the background. I am not on the vegan or non-vegan side. I remain impartial at all times. So it was about 3 years ago. I was sat at home on my sofa, scrolling through Facebook, and I found images similar to these. I suddenly felt upset, angry and confused. Did this really happen to dogs? So off I went onto the web and found very upsetting images, videos and stories of the dog meat trade in China. I also came across a demo going on outside the Chinese embassy. As an activist, I just knew I had to go and show my support against the dog meat trade. So there I was with my homemade sign, saying with my 2 dogs on it, "Don't eat us, feed us." It was at this point I met my very first group of vegans. They asked why I was here. I said I'd seen stuff online that had made me angry. I was then asked if I was vegan. I did not know what vegan was, so I said no. I was then told I was not welcome at this demo anymore, as it was for vegans only, and that I was an animal abuser. I said, "How am I? I'm here to show my support against the dog meat trade." They said I still supported the meat and dairy industry. I felt confused. How did me eating food make me an animal abuser? I'm glad to say my second encounter with a vegan was much nicer. I met Phoebe at a small demo about the homeless spikes going up around the UK, and we got chatting and she told me she was vegan. Chatting with Phoebe over a small amount of time was totally different to the very first vegans I had met. She even invited me to an anti-foie gras protest. As an activist I could not say no. So the very next day I met up with a group of vegans and watched them as they did a walk-in, which is where they go into a restaurant and shout out, I did wonder to myself if this was really going to change anything, or did people even care. Then the very next day we went to a new restaurant, and before the group had got the megaphones out, the manager came up to us to show us he had taken foie gras off the menu. For the very first time as an activist I had seen change through protesting. Even as a non-vegan, it felt amazing. But this was one restaurant and a handful of people, so I was invited to the Earthlings experience. And I met Jimmy. We had a chat about some things I had on my mind. I needed to ask some questions. Is there such a thing as ethical meat?
No, there's no such thing as, like, there could have never been such a thing. Like, even though, like, people will say that meat is, like, humanely raised and stuff like that, or even, like, people take it to an extreme that say humanely slaughtered.
And why did you decide to give up meat?
I saw what my money was going to, and that I was paying for other people to kill these animals and like to torture these animals, and I was like, you know, like it's really not me. Like I don't want to contribute to it in any sense.
What was your diet like before you went vegan?
It was really boring, to be honest. But it was the same thing every 2 days. Like there was no change. It's like when you're a meat eater, you're a virgin, and then you go vegan, and then it's like the first time you have sex, and then this whole new world.
Aren't plants living things too? Why is it okay to eat them and not animals?
Because plants are not sentient beings, you know, like, I can put it that simple, and then, or I can be like, if you had like a baby chick and an apple and you were fucking starving, which one would you choose to eat, right, at that moment? And anyone who would say that the chicken, they're fucking lying.
What's wrong with just being vegetarian?
When you're veggie, you're still supporting both the meat industry and the dairy industry. If you eat like dairy products, that means that you're still taking a baby calf away from her mom cow to steal that milk, and then that baby calf usually will be gone either to a dairy farm to be, you know, to continue the circle, and then that baby calf and her mother will be raped from human hands, like to be impregnated, so like then we steal another baby calf and we keep the next kind of like milk. Or if it's a boy, they're gonna kill it and sell it as a veal. That's what's wrong with being veggie. And then when it comes to like the egg industry, they're not much different either. Like the egg industry gonna blend all the male chicks and make chicken nuggets, and then you will be like, yeah, well, I don't eat meat, but you just like did like contribute in this whole like slaughtering.
If we all went vegan, wouldn't we all be overrun by animals?
I have this question, I get this a lot, especially when we do outreach. The thing is, people don't really get that if we all stop eating cows and pigs and chickens and geese and every single animal, that we wouldn't breed them. It's as simple as that. Like, they would live their lives, and you know, nature would take back, like, and be in order again. But they were like, there's so many pigs and there's so many cows. Yeah, but all these pigs and cows exist because of the dairy and the meat industry. So if you don't support these industries, we won't breed them. They won't be anymore.
After chatting to Jimmy, he invited me back to the Earthlings experience again next week. So next Saturday came round and it was a rainy day. And I did ask myself if the event was still going to go ahead. I decided to go and take a look. When I arrived, a small amount of people had come out, and I was told the Earthlings experience was going to be a little different tonight because of the rain. We was going on the underground. I must say I felt this was not going to work. I was shocked at how many people took it in. So I went back again to the Earthlings experience the next week, and the weather was on our side. And I noticed there was some young children who were there, part of the group, and after chatting with their mum, I asked if I could chat with them. Why did you give up meat?
I never really ate meat very much. I was a vegetarian since I was born, so I never had meat. But the reason I gave up dairy and eggs was because I feel compassion, and I realised, wait, hold on a second. Why am I drinking someone else's milk? Why am I stealing from someone else? I mean, everyone knows that stealing is not right, so why am I doing it? And then I looked into it and I found out it was way worse than I thought.
What's the best thing about being vegan?
You are never bored, and you can always be doing something, and you can just enjoy food more.
I was then invited to a Close All Slaughterhouses demo. I noticed every demo I went to, I was always invited to the next one, so I picked 3 demos, including the Close All Slaughterhouses and the Canada Goose, and the one that everyone was waiting for was the Animal Rights March. There were lots more vegan demos I could have chosen to go to. I noticed at the demos the public was not always understanding of the demos. There was a time at a demo I saw a man in his late 60s try to hit Phoebe in the face. There was a time a man came out of a restaurant and shouted at us in an angry manner. The police did nothing. Even when I had seen enough of this guy and lost it a little bit by swearing, I was the one that was threatened with arrest.
If you're not a protester, you're allowed to swear, be abusive to other police. The Metropolitan Police will stand around and watch. But if it's the other way around, they don't give a shit.
Give it arrest, me.
They don't give a shit.
Give it arrest, me, yeah.
I felt the police are on one side, and that is the side of the non-vegan activist. Then I saw it from a different side. It was outside the Jamie Oliver restaurant, and the vegans were shouting at the window to the restaurant. I noticed a mother and a small child walking towards the restaurant, and the vegans called her an animal abuser. I felt uncomfortable with this as I remembered the first time I was called an animal abuser. I did speak to the mother who did not want to be filmed. I asked her, how does it feel to be called an animal abuser? She replied back saying,
"For one, I'm not an animal abuser. I'm a vegetarian who has thought of going vegan. But if this is what being vegan is all about, then it's not for me. I'm here just to eat with my mother for Mother's Day."
It was at the Close All Slaughterhouses demo when again I noticed the vegans shouting at people eating at the Angus Steakhouse.
You need to be able to provide us clear access for our customers coming in and out. So can you move to the
I asked to speak with a couple for an interview. They said they felt uncomfortable to talk on camera. I said to them it's important to try and get both sides of the story, and here is what they had to say.
The protest outside the steakhouse, and then I think there's a lot of people out there enjoying the sun, having their dinners, and all these people come up and start chanting against them, saying you're horrible, your meat is. So I went in, well we went in, because we were going to have dinner, just to defy them. That's probably the wrong idea to do. However, we didn't want dinner, so we come back out.
As I came out, they called me a cunt.
Oh, I was going to say that.
Freedom of justice! There's no excuse for animal abuse!
called my wife that horrible name, which you just said, which I hope you're going to bleep out. However, I started talking, and I confronted the guy. I said, don't talk to a woman like that. Not a man, animal, child, or anything. Don't do that. So I went up to the guy, and he's all in my face. So I said, look, go away. So I walked away, and then I started talking to a girl, and she was having a very good conversation. And the two idiots.
I completely understand how they feel about animals, and I know the way they're treated, and it's awful and stuff like that. But we actually breed these animals for our food. At the end of the day, they wouldn't actually have a life.
There's no excuse!
If we didn't actually eat meat, these guys wouldn't have a life. We actually breed a lot of these animals.
Let's not go down that
But we
far.
do. We breed a lot of these animals.
Everyone's got to have a choice.
Would you mind just keeping this area clear?
Yeah, if someone wants to come past, I'll move.
Everyone's got a choice.
I went to the Canada Goose demo, and I noticed throughout the day the security of Canada Goose trying to wind up vegan activists, along with the police trying to get members of the public to make complaints against the demo. Later on, I found out this was so the police and Canada Goose could get an injunction against the activists. This has now been put in place. Things like, they can't film the store, they can only use one megaphone at a time and only for around 15 minutes, then they must take a break for a certain amount of time. It was at Canada Goose where I saw the worst thing happen. The vegans were outside chanting, then as I was talking to someone to try and get an interview, I heard a very loud shouting, and two guys looked like they were fighting. I managed to speak to the vegan activist just before he was arrested.
Was you assaulted at all?
Yeah, what happened? I said, some guy walked past and he goes, what are they protesting about here? I just said, about the use of fur in their products. Dogs get stamped to death, they get skinned, the rest. And then he goes, why don't you go protest outside the Syrian embassy? Yeah, why don't you get rid of them instead of wasting your time on dogs? So I dashed a bit of my smoothie over him, and then he comes to punch me. I just put my hands down, put my head down, put my hands up like that.
Then as I was packing up for the night, I noticed a vegan had had her hair pulled by a member of the public, and another vegan activist got involved but was taken away by the police very quickly. I unpacked my camera stuff and started to film.
Ouch! You fucking know what they do her! So I'm being arrested at the moment because someone has assaulted my sister at a Canada Goose protest. I've gone for her as well since she touched my sister. This is what the police do at our protest. She has been let go. I am now in cuffs and I'm going to the police station. She was the one that assaulted one of us.
As the young lady was taken away in the police van, I did think to myself that the vegan activists had had it hard that day. I'd seen activists being punched at, shouted at in the face, aggressively pushed by members of the public. The police did very little when this happened. I found it very worrying that the police, the people that are there to protect us, would find images like this funny. Their whole attitude seemed to be taking the mickey out of the activists throughout the day. Even here, the police officer gestures a nice little wave goodbye. I was chatting with activists about the dairy industry, and they told me about baby calves being taken from their mothers, and male calves are shot dead at 1 or 2 days old. When you think of milk, you think of cows eating the green grass with their babies by their side. I could not believe what I was hearing, so I tried to get more information on this. After sending lots of emails back and forth, I eventually rang and spoke to a guy from AHDB Dairy.
AHDB Press Office, can I help you?
And I was just wondering if anyone was available just to take a quick phone call with some questions.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
One question that keeps on popping up is, I don't know if it would be on the website, but I don't know if you'd be able to answer this. Do you know if it's true that the male calves are taken away so the cows can produce milk?
No, okay, so let me just give you a little bit of explanation, because that sounds like a very straightforward question, but it's actually not a straightforward question. So let me just give you some guidance around that then. So generally what happens so there will be exceptions to this, but generally what happens is that in order for a cow to be able to produce milk, she has to be pregnant.
Right.
And she has to have a calf. And generally speaking, calves are taken away from the cow within the sort of first 24 hours or so. Some may stay for several days. So there's no absolute to this.
Right.
It will depend on the farm and the system that the farmer operates. But the calf needs to remain with the cow for a certain amount of time to enable it to take the colostrum that it needs to build up some of its immune system.
Right, okay,
So very much like a human baby, there's a requirement to take on colostrum to build up resistance against disease and what have you. And generally what happens then is that calves are then cared for in a group, which may be sort of 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 or whatever, and they're given a specific diet then to help them grow healthily and not contract bacterial diseases that they may get from being amongst other cows.
Right.
So adult cows as opposed to other calves, adult cows, and that then of course then enables the production and the farmer to be able to get the milk, which is what the desired outcome is. So you want a healthy calf, and you want to be able to have milk.
Okay.
So that's what happens. So it's a separate question entirely about bull calves.
Mm-hmm.
That's an entirely separate matter, because then there's female calves are often bred for what they call for replacing or for increasing the farmer's herd.
Right, okay.
So they can go back into that system, or they can go to other farms as when they become adults they can produce calves and produce milk. The bull calves, there's a couple of things that can happen to them. So they can be bred for, not bred, they can be reared then to go into the beef herd,
mm-hmm.
Or for in some cases they're reared for veal consumption.
Yep.
So there's some options. That kind of thing.
How long does like a dairy cow actually produce milk for? Because obviously once it's been pregnant and the baby's been taken away, it would only obviously lactate.
Well, they're not babies, they're calves.
For the very first time I'd heard it for myself, the vegans had told me how we use words like bacon, not pig, beef, not cow, or like what the guy said, they're not babies, they're calves, or just like babies, they need milk, and I'm sure they'd like to be with their mums. So I put lots of messages up about doing interviews for the documentary, and having lots of vegan friends on my Facebook list, I was thinking this would be easy. So I put up a post asking for vegans to come forward to help me. I got lots of messages and very little came of them. This was very upsetting, but I needed to get this done. And then I managed to chat with some vegans at the demos. Knowing the sound would not be the best, I did my best to carry on. And I managed to chat with Michael and Jay and some others. Is there such thing as ethical meat?
I don't think there is anything called ethical meat. There might be in the future. They talk about cellular meat, they're talking about clean meat, and there's a huge amount of investment now going into clean meat. Coming out, for example, that Tyson, one of the largest meat selling organisations in the United States, have invested in a company called Beyond Meat. And even Eric Schmidt, who is one of the executive officers of Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, has said that the hottest topic in technology at the moment is cellular meat, clean meat. So, and he knows what he's talking about. But in terms of existing meat production, there is no ethical meat because the animal didn't want to die for us to eat it.
There is no such thing as ethical meat. How can there be ethical meat? You know, even the welfarist organisations and the industries that are using welfarist terminology such as free range, grass-fed, organic, locally sourced, that is implying that animals are here for our purpose and that we can use them in any way in which they want. But the worst of the lot is humane slaughter, because it doesn't matter how we treat these animals, whether they are free range, grass-fed, blah blah, what I've already just said, or whether they're from factory farms. The destination is still the same, and they're going to be killed, whether they want to or not. They have no choice in that. Someone has decided that they're going to be slaughtered. And so this is the point, humane slaughter. Slaughter, if you look the definition up, is disastrous. If we talk about it in human terms, when we talk about human beings slaughtered, the images that we conjure up are people being butchered in the most vicious, violent ways. But when we talk about non-human animals being slaughtered, oh, it's okay, it's humane. If you look at the word humane, then that implies kindness, caring, compassion, empathy. So how can you put humane slaughter together? It's another example of an oxymoron. Two words put together, contradicting.
And why did you give up meat?
Well, I gave up meat because my son enlightened me, took the blinkers off my eyes. He said to me, Dad, you know, you're a compassionate individual as far as I can tell, and I can't understand why you think it's okay to consume the flesh of another being that didn't want to die. And how come you get over your core values of justice, peace, compassion, respect, equality, and you put those to one side when it comes to lunch, breakfast, dinner? And I said, well, I actually hadn't thought about it, but here we go. So here I am, a fully fledged vegan.
Why did I give up meat? Well, one, I don't like using that term anymore, because if I point to my skin, I wouldn't call it meat, I would actually call it flesh. So again, this is part of the problem that we have when the words that we use, we're so conditioned by them, we don't even actually think about them. Why I stopped eating flesh was because I started meeting people who were educating me about things that I didn't know, possibly had considered, but because my parents, the society that I grew up in, taught me that it was normal, natural and necessary to eat slaughtered animals, their flesh and their secretions. I did it. Why I stopped was precisely because I've been shown what was happening. And if I thought that I was a caring, concerned person about others, humans, the environment, how could I be participating in something that was causing problems for others?
Aren't plants living things too?
Plants are living things. Yeah, trees are. We can see that they are. However, they're not sentient beings in the way that we would look at yourself, me, and all the people that are surrounding us, nor are they the same as non-human animals. They don't have a central nervous system. They cannot get up and run away. And I know that this is an argument that people try and use, that plants have feelings, plants have lives, plants are living, blah, 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 when they're presented with veganism for the first time. And what people have to realize is that veganism isn't a diet, it's the non-use of animals for any purpose, you know, be it for food, for clothing, for sport and entertainment, for experimentation, even the pet industry. So it's a term that actually quite a lot of vegans have started to sort of use, is, oh, here come the plant rights activists. Because if you actually care about plants, then you would become vegan, because we have to cut down more trees to grow more plants to feed the animals when we could use less plants to feed more humans.
Can vegans have pets?
Vegans can definitely have pets, yes. The pets they should have, though, are the ones that come from rescue centres where they have been abandoned, but certainly not pets that have been bred, you know, and I think that's very cruel. You shouldn't breed anything for your own purpose and joy and pleasure when actually at the end of the day you treat them as subordinates, and then ultimately they die in the farm animal industry a miserable death. But yes, you can have pets, and lots of my vegan friends do have pets. But those pets are ones they've got from sanctuaries or they've taken from rescue centres.
Can vegans have pets? Yes, vegans can have pets. My view on that is that we have to look at what the word pet is. There are some vegans who have companion animals, some who have rescued animals. You know, there are people that have sanctuaries. When we buy, and I won't, I've never bought an animal, but when people buy from breeders, we're actually creating, like we've done with farmed animals, we're creating animals purely to make money. The diseases and the illnesses that can come from that, again, someone who's an expert in that field would have to tell you more about it than I could. But the other aspect of that is that most people, when they have a pet, feed their animals, or the animals, byproducts of the animal agriculture industry. I know there are people that feed dogs and cats vegan diets, and it causes great debates, etc., etc. But you have to actually have a look at, well, how can we make sure that the animals get what they need? And one of the, especially with cats, again, I'm not an expert, but I do realise that it is the taurine that they need, and that can be provided in a vegan diet for cats.
I also noticed the vegans did lots of outreach, very much like the Earthlings experience. They would chat to members of the public and show them video clips of the dairy and meat industry. At one of the events, I got chatting with an activist and I was told about the SAVE movement. I asked them some questions about this movement and what it was.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and what that is?
Yeah, Manchester Pig Slip is part of the SAVE movement, which started in Canada. It was, as far as I'm aware, the first one here. It's basically activists will gather outside a slaughterhouse and they will try to stop the trucks as the slaughterhouse trucks actually go in with the animals inside them. Manchester is obviously pigs. We will try to bear witness to the animals, try to comfort them on their way into the slaughterhouse, and also try to obtain footage so that we can show people what it's actually like for them as they go to die.
Is there such thing as ethical meat?
There is no such thing as ethical meat, no. I mean, I can understand how people would look at it and think there is, but that's because we are very purposefully disconnected from the actual process of that. If you run somebody through the actual process of, let's say, for example, bacon, for example, like, it's not as simple as there is something humane that happens and it dies and then it's in your frying pan. It's not real. It's taken to a slaughterhouse. It is crammed in that truck with loads of other pigs. They don't get to drink. They will not get to eat for that journey. They are then either gassed alive, like burned from the inside out, or they are stunned in the head and then they have their throat slit, which isn't always effective. And then they're dunked in boiling water so as to loosen their fur, and then that fur is then removed. So I would say no, there is no such thing as ethical meat, because I think if you were to put that process to somebody, they couldn't point out what part of that is ethical.
Can you tell me what group you're a part of?
We run Guildford Animal Save, which is based in Surrey, in the southwest of England.
We're a group of people that we're part of the SAVE movement, the wider branch based in the UK. And we basically record footage of trucks going into slaughterhouses and bear witness to their animals going there about to die. We try and share it on Facebook and things like that to make people more aware of what they're eating, and also so that we can provide some comfort to the animals before they die.
How does it make you feel seeing these animals go to their deaths?
I think it was a very emotional experience, and I think it's good because usually when we set up the events we do them monthly and we have a good turnout of people. We have about 50 people turn up, and a load of them have never been to a SAVE before, and you can get a lot of them crying, and once you see the animals you really do make that connection between what it is you're eating.
And how many trucks would turn up on a typical day?
It depends what day it is.
I think the most we've had is 9.
Yeah, but that's only in the morning, because usually we stay there between 7 and 12, so that's just between those hours, so it could be.
But our particular SAVE group is based in a place called AVP, and they have cows come in, and we usually have double deckers of trucks filled with cows. So
I think we worked out that they might take up to, is it 200 or slightly less animals a day?
And what are the conditions like for the animals?
It's awful. It really is bad, and I think it doesn't matter whether they were on a free-range farm and at any point, they were allowed to be grazing in the field. In the lead up to their deaths, they're stuffed into a truck. They'll be there for several hours going towards the slaughterhouse, and we've actually seen as they're pulling up, usually we can see into the truck, they've got feces all on the floor.
I've witnessed cows soiling themselves in the trucks because they're so frightened. They feed off the energy of the slaughterhouse, because cows are not stupid, they know what's coming.
And a lot of the time it will actually leak out of the trucks as well onto the road.
And how do the staff treat you at the slaughterhouse? What are their reactions like?
It's quite mixed, but most of the, well, we found that recently they've gotten quite aggressive. They don't really like us being there, and they've tried to put as much sort of obstacles in our way as possible. So for example, before we went, we had a very clear fence, whereas now it's got a netting behind it. So they basically don't want us to see the animals because they know it's having an effect. They know that when the consumer sees the cows for individuals rather than a packaged piece of meat, it's affecting their business.
And what would you say the public's reaction is to this?
Mixed. Because we're on a very busy main road, and so we get lots of people shouting in support, but then we also get lots of people shouting ridiculous stuff like, do you want a nice bit of steak? Which it is annoying, but at the end of the day,
usually they're saying that more to themselves as a defence.
Yeah.
Just make a joke out of it. But I think it's quite powerful when you've got several people standing outside a building, all with placards saying that we don't agree with this slaughterhouse and we don't agree with what goes on here. You know, the public has to take notice of it.
Is there any sort of chanting or shouting going on outside the slaughterhouse? What kind of atmosphere is there?
We don't usually engage in chanting, mostly because A, nobody can hear us because it's such a busy road, and B, when the animals are there, we don't want to frighten them any more than
it's about being there with those animals and respecting them as individuals and giving them the time, because they would have just been treated as a number their whole life, so it's making the connection between yourself and them. We usually have a minute's silence afterwards as well once a truck comes in, just out of respect to those animals, because the amount that the slaughterhouse kills, if that was a human destruction, you know, a war that killed that many human beings, we'd be doing a minute's silence, you know, every year for it.
And last question now. What does it make you feel when you look into those animals' eyes?
Awful, really dreadful. I mean, when you're actually there, I find that you're running on adrenaline, and especially as organisers, we're trying to think about where are the trucks going, who's in front of them, and all this. You don't have time to really... You connect with the animals, but you don't have time to appreciate their feelings until later. I mean, I know from the last save, I managed to keep it all together while I was with them, because I don't want them to feed off my negative energy, but as soon as I got home, it just all comes out, like just all the sadness you feel knowing that they're all dead now. So it is quite emotional.
I think it's emotional as well when you look at them and you know that they know what's happening. You know, we've seen it where cows will be shouting out of the slats in the truck, and you know how you can't imagine that fear that they must have inside them, being cramped with their peers, covered in their own feces, just knowing that something awful is going to happen to them.
So at the time of filming, I felt that I didn't have enough interviews, so I put another post up on Facebook asking for people to come forward. No vegans did, and I was getting really upset by this. But lucky enough, a few days later, a mother messaged me saying that she was not vegan but her daughter was. I felt that this would be quite an interesting interview. 1, I had great sound, and 2, I could talk to them away from the demos and the noises in the background, and this is what they had to say.
I'm Jasmine, I'm 17, and I'm quite a recent vegan, I suppose, and it's my mother.
I'm Anna, I'm 55, I'm an omnivore.
What's it like being in a house with a vegan?
Bloody hell. It's not that it's being in a house with a vegan, it's that being a mother of a vegan is challenging, especially a young girl, because there's already the kind of pressures of eating disorders and comfort eating and nutrition and health, and being a sort of mother who perhaps is inclined to offer food as a love or caring gesture. It's difficult because I have had to research nutrition and come to terms with potential malnourishment of my child and the long-term detrimental effects that veganism may have on her health in the future. So I am proud in some respects, but I'm also very, very challenged by it. So I have also another daughter who's a big meat eater. So I have, use separate spoons, separate chopping boards, different type of mothering for both of them.
Why did you give up meat?
Well, I never ever really liked the taste of meat since I can remember. So I first went fully vegetarian when I was 7.
Have you seen any vegan demos? If yes, what was it for and how did they come across to you?
Yeah, I think when lots of vegans are very angry and then they go to these demos and it gives a really wrong message, like just some kind of violent hate kind of group. But I think when it turns into that, it's like, when anything turns into that, it's kind of, no one wants to go near that.
Do you think some vegans can be judgmental or too judgmental?
I think people, in order to have a sense of themselves, make judgments. We monitor the people that we're interacting with, and when a vegan comes, might meet them anywhere and they go, oh, should we go and have a cup of tea? And they're like, oh, I'm a vegan, I don't drink that, or I don't eat that. There's always a little self-reference, and it may be that the vegan isn't judgmental, they might just be self-righteous, and that we haven't.
See, when I go places and I have to say, oh, I'm a vegan so I can't, I feel embarrassed by it, because I really don't like drawing attention to myself and making a fuss. So when I say I don't want to sound righteous, like, oh, I'm a vegan, I can't have that, but it often comes across that way. I mean,
it really does, doesn't it?
I mean, like any way you say it, it sounds like you're being like, oh, sorry, I can't. It's like you're better. Like,
it's like our family member was basically who loves to gorge on yummy,
and just she's very generous. Have this, make sure you're happy and satisfied. But
you couldn't get a more unassuming vegan in. I mean, until you went a little bit, staunch. What? The other day on us when we were slathering butter on our.
Well, sometimes
something, cheese or something.
I will, if someone wants to hear about why they should be vegan, I'll tell them.
But that's what I mean. It's not all about the vegan. It's all about our own ability to make sacrifices for what we believe in, and we are ultimately human beings, are lazy and self-indulgent, and we'll go for the happy feeling.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing about being vegan?
Well, actually, when I have to say it to people, I really, really find it kind of awkward, and if I have to ask in a restaurant, I really don't like that. That's kind of one of the things that took me a long time to go properly vegan, because when I would go somewhere, I wouldn't want to make a fuss and be like, oh, like making people cater for me particularly. That was one of the hardest things I found, because I like to just, be polite, I suppose. But I guess when I kind of just crave a biscuit or something like that, like just some sugary snack or something just satisfying me, and there's nothing, that was also quite hard when you're just like, oh.
I don't think it's that there's nothing. I think that there are things like nuts and greens, and they're things that aren't as instantly satisfying. They're not filling enough, and I think that you get hungry more than me and Tina.
No, I'm not talking about hungry. I'm just, when you just like, you want like a cake or something, and there's not really, if you're just a general, you just can get whatever you want, and you can just buy something that will be exactly what you need. But then when you're a vegan, you have to look through all the shops.
What's the best thing about being vegan?
There are lots of good things. Obviously, the best thing is probably, I don't want to say not causing animal suffering, because obviously everything we do has some effect on animals, but I guess so, yeah, doing the best I can to not input to the suffering of animals is probably the best thing.
Can I answer that as well?
Yeah.
I'm not a vegan, but I think every choice that we make that is considered regarding the suffering of our ecosystem and our animals that that we share this planet with, it is a heartening. It's like that. It allows for love, and I think that's really good.
And is it only animals that you protest for?
Oh well, I guess the environment, and because meat industry produces so much greenhouse gases, it really causes that's one of the main causes of global warming.
How does it make you feel when you see maybe other vegans or someone getting in someone's face or being aggressive towards them for, say, wearing fur or eating meat?
It kind of makes me frustrated, because I feel like that's a really wrong way to go about trying to connect with someone and educate them, because if you're shouting at someone and you're being, you know, you're attacking them, that's not going to get you anywhere.
You provoke defensiveness.
Yeah, they're going to be like, oh, I don't want to listen to you, and I don't want to be, you know, part of that. If you're just kind of shouting at them, I think that. So when other people are doing it, I find it very frustrating, because if you just ask them questions and you engage and you listen and have a conversation, and through that, you know, give them facts and tell them why, then that's going to be way more effective. I think that's the same with anything. Doesn't matter what you're talking about.
And how would you feel if someone just says that you're just pushing your feelings, your thoughts onto someone else?
What's the difference between that anyway and advertising? You know, listen to the bloody radio and you get force-fed.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
true, it's all around us.
I think that people do sometimes say, you're just trying to change me, or freedom of speech and freedom of rights. And I think a very helpful thing, I like those quantitative, sometimes qualitative things where they say your action has saved this bear, has been rehoused, or this buying this non-animal based soap has saved, you know, one, you know, you've reduced the profits of, I don't know, whoever it is. I like it when there's a positive feedback. Like when you say to me, well done mummy, you haven't bought any milk for 2 months.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, oh, you know,
yeah,
that works. Positive affirmations are very good.
So a big thank you to Jasmine and her mum Anna, who I could have spoken to all day about lots of different things. I have done lots of research for this documentary, and I have noticed lots of videos and YouTube channels about being vegan, or just becoming vegan, or just vegan content. I tried to get an interview with Joey Carbstrong, but he never got back to us. I messaged that vegan couple and they could not help. Lucky enough, I knew Earthling Ed and we had a chat. Is there such a thing called ethical meat?
No, I mean, what we've got to remember when it comes to meat production is an animal always has to die, and you can never humanely kill an animal that wants to live, and that's what we've got to remember. So it doesn't matter how the animal's raised, it doesn't matter the situation, the circumstances, the animal ultimately has to die, and you can't kill an animal in a humane way, no.
Why did you give up meat?
So it was for ethical reasons. I came across a film called Earthlings, which is a documentary that basically takes you through all the different ways that we exploit animals, and in particular it focuses a lot on the meat, dairy and egg industries, and after that I couldn't possibly live with myself, because I knew that my morals said that I respected life and that I think that all animals should be given that equal chance to live, but my actions were saying that I didn't believe that animals should die for my taste alone, so that was why I gave up eating meat.
And what was your diet like before you gave up meat?
Before I gave up, I had Domino's and KFC every week, and I just used to binge on animal products. Cheese was a big one. I used to have halloumi all the time. I mean, I guess it's just kind of like the standard Western diet. I would eat meat, dairy and eggs every single day, but particularly Domino's and KFC.
Aren't plants living things too?
The thing we've got to remember with plants is they are alive, so in the sense that they grow, but they lack a brain and a central nervous system. So what we've got to, the crucial thing is that plants respond, but they don't react. No, sorry, plants react, but they don't respond. So in a situation where a plant is growing in the ground, it's responding to the sunshine, so it's growing towards the sun, but they're not conscious, they're not sentient, they don't feel pain the same way that animals do. And if the argument is that plants feel pain, it takes up to 16 times more crops to make 1 pound. So 16 kilograms of crops to make 1 kilogram of beef. So even if you believe that plants feel pain, that plants should be granted a right to live, you should still be vegan, because it takes a hell of a lot more crops to produce animal products than it does just to feed ourselves.
Eggs, what's wrong with them?
So in the egg industry, all male chicks are useless because they don't produce eggs, and they're not the same breed that can be used for meat, which means that they won't ever be profitable to the meat industry. So as soon as they're born, they're taken to be killed, and the ways that they're killed is they'll either be ground alive in a macerator, or they will be gassed to death and used for like pet food for like snakes and stuff like that. So that's the big thing. Secondly, eggs. 51% of the eggs that we eat in this country come from caged hens, which is obviously a horrible situation. The hens aren't allowed to fly, they're not allowed to move, they can't stretch out their wings, they're crammed into these cages. The other comes from free range. Now free range is a massive con. The issue with free range is you can keep up to 16,000 birds in one shed, and a farmer can legally house 9 birds per square metre of space. So these hens have absolutely no room to move, and even though technically, legally, there's supposed to be an area where they can get outside, very few of the hens ever make outside. So inherently, what happens in free range egg farming systems is all the hens are kept in the indoor farming system where they're not ever allowed to be outside. So instead of being in small cages, they're in one big cage. And ultimately, when the eggs stop producing eggs, which is about, so when the hens stop producing eggs, which is about 72 weeks into their life, they're sent to be slaughtered, so they all die anyway.
What's wrong with just being vegetarian?
So it comes down to this milk and egg thing. So like I said, the egg industry is incredibly immoral and results in animals being killed, and the dairy industry is exactly the same. So in the dairy industry, the only reason that cows produce milk is to feed their children. They have to give birth. So the farmers will artificially inseminate them by putting their arm inside the cow's anus, holding her cervix in place, then forcibly inserting semen inside of her. Now, if we did that to a dog or a cat, we'd have pretty strong words that we'd use to describe that. But for some reason, when we do it to cows or pigs, it's part of someone's job. It's their, they get paid to do it, which is really wrong. So, and ultimately, all dairy cows end up killed. So if you're a vegetarian because you believe that animals shouldn't die, then that doesn't make any sense because animals are still dying in the dairy and egg industry. So morally, to be morally coherent, vegetarianism doesn't make any sense.
I wanted to cover a lot more in this documentary, but the running time was running a little bit more than I wanted. But as we had Ed here, I felt there was something really that I needed to ask him about. What's wrong with zoos?
So the zooing thing is an interesting one. A lot of people think that zoos are good for like conservation stuff, but actually that's a complete, it's a marketing ploy, it's a lie. What we've done is we've taken animals out of their natural environment, put them in these artificial places where they have absolutely no room to exhibit their natural behaviours, and they go insane and they suffer from something called zoochosis, which is where they literally go insane. So you'll see in zoos, you'll see animals pacing up and down, you'll see them doing weird things, sometimes they even self-mutilate. And in fact, zoos actually sometimes even kill their animals and they'll cull them as well. So zoos are very immoral because we're teaching children in particular a very warped perception of what animals should be for us. And now people say that it's good for children to see these animals because they wouldn't normally see them and it helps them become interested in animals. But dinosaurs don't exist anymore, but children are fascinated with dinosaurs, which means we don't have to go to the zoos to see these animals to get children fascinated in wildlife, because children are naturally curious and naturally fascinated in things that are beautiful on this planet, whether it be dinosaurs or natural animals that are still alive today. So zoos have no place in this world, and inherently they're prisons for these beings.
Can vegans have pets?
Yeah, I mean, so what you've got to remember is if you rescue an animal, then that's a really, really noble thing to do, because you're giving that animal a life and you're giving it a chance to live a life that it deserves to live. When we buy animals, whether it's from breeders or from pet shops, we commodify them, which means we put a price tag on them and we treat them as objects that we can pay for. Now that's not acceptable. Now, and we've got to remember that 10,000 dogs are put down every single day because the animals people get, or so dogs they get, come from breeders rather than from rescuing them. So it's really, really annoying because we live in a world, or a society in particular, that loves dogs. We love dogs, yet every day we're allowing dogs to be euthanized and killed at huge rates because we'd rather buy from a breeder than rescue them. So we always say adopt, don't shop, and that's kind of the vegan philosophy.
There were many more vegan questions I could have asked Ed, but I felt that we've covered a lot of these in the documentary already. I'd also heard that Ed had set up his own group and was also preparing for a very big march to go through London. I wanted to find out a little more.
I do a whole range of different things. So I have a YouTube channel where I make YouTube videos basically and promote veganism through doing street interviews, through making educational content, through going like excuses that people use to not go vegan and kind of debunking them. I do protests and demos, I do outreach events. Basically, I think that talking to people is the most powerful tool that we have. Like if we have conversations with people, that's when we can enact like a real positive change. The group is called Surge, so we're a London-based animal rights organisation. We preach abolitionism, which is basically, that all animal exploitation is wrong and all animal exploitation should be ended. So that's our group. We do lots of events, we do things. We're doing an animal rights march in September. So yeah, this is Surge.
And since filming, Ed has gone on to open up his own restaurant, where all the profits will go into looking after animals on a sanctuary and no longer destined for our plate. I then asked Ed what he hoped to achieve with the Animal Rights March.
Two things really. We want to build a community, so we want people to come together, meet vegans, meet people they've never met before, make friends and have a great time. But on the back of that, we want to inspire people and empower vegans to become active. Now the main message we always have at the Animal Rights March, or we will continue to have, is you've got to do something to get active and make a difference. Now it's all well and good being vegan, but we have to make sure that we're speaking up and being a voice, because veganism in itself is non-participation. It's not until you become an activist that you start actively opposing and stopping these industries. So the main thing about the march is to give people a great time, build a sense of community, but also inspire and empower people to make a difference to themselves and to stand up and speak up.
I also asked Ed about the time I was outside the Angus Steakhouse and heard the vegans shouting at people inside the restaurant, and whether he felt if this was having a negative impact on the movement.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that there are an abundance, it's a huge range of different activism approaches, and I believe that they all have their place in certain situations. But what we've got to do as activists is be really savvy and make sure that the situation when we're in, we are acting appropriately. So like, I don't believe shouting at families is necessarily an effective approach, but there are times where being vocal and being loud and shaming is effective. So I don't know, I think we've got to be adaptable, and we've got to also be sensitive to the different needs of different people and respond to the certain situations we're in effectively.
I also asked Ed about the time we was at London Fashion Week, and I seen the vegans shouting at people that weren't even wearing fur, and why he felt that shouting at people wearing fur was a good idea.
I think the approach we should always take first and foremost is an educational approach. So if someone's wearing fur, say to them, like, are you aware of the cruelty involved in the fur industry? And if they are rude or they know about it and choose to ignore it, then yeah, we should be shaming these people, because we've got to make sure that they realise that these things will not be tolerated in society. And if we stay silent and we don't shame people for wearing these products, we're saying that it's acceptable. Now, the only way we're going to get rid of things like fur is by making people not want to wear it and feel uncomfortable wearing it. Fur is like a symbol of elitism in class, and people wear it to look egoic, and they want to strut around and they want people to be impressed by them. If we can take that away from them and show that we're not impressed, and actually we're going to reduce your ego and knock you down a size, they're going to be less inclined to wear it. So I think there are certain situations, which is what I was saying earlier about choosing what's effective in the situation. There are certain situations where being vocal and being shaming people can be used for good. So a walk-in, primarily, it depends what you're targeting. So a walk-in is when you go into an establishment or a shop and you chant or you do a speech or you hold up signs and you cause a disruption. And basically what you're trying to say to people in the shop is boycott their products, and you want to tell the people who run the shop, the managers and the shop itself, whoever owns it, that this is no longer going to be tolerated and that we actually stand against what you're doing. And it comes down to this idea of being complicit, and if we don't speak up and do something, we remain complicit in that thing still happening. So walk is basically us taking a very direct approach and confronting the company directly and saying that we oppose what you're doing.
I asked Ed, what about the people inside the shop, the workers? You could be taking jobs away from them and potentially closing down a business. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's an interesting one. In Yulin, where they slaughter dogs, that is people's livelihoods, and people make money and survive by slaughtering dogs. Now, no one in this country is going to turn around and say, well, we shouldn't stop Yulin because people won't be able to get money from slaughtering dogs. It's not going to happen. A pimp is another example. So someone, a pimp who exploits women, makes money from that, and he makes his livelihood from that. But that doesn't mean what he's doing is moral or should be allowed to continue. And it's the same with these industries. Just because someone is profiting from the industry or making money from it doesn't make it moral. Now, most people can find jobs doing other things. And in fact, it's really easy because stuff like MAC or cosmetics or companies that sell clothes don't have to shut down or fire anyone. All they have to do is change what they're selling. So a company like MAC Cosmetics, all they have to do is go cruelty-free. A company like Michael Kors or Burberry, they have to stop selling animal skins and animal flesh and just produce vegan clothing. So no one loses their job, no one loses their money, and everyone wins.
I had two questions that I needed to ask Ed. Do you hate meat eaters, and can you still love animals and eat them?
No, I don't hate meat eaters. I was a meat eater, so it'd be stupid of me to hate them. No, you can't love animals and eat them because you're exploiting an animal and you're killing an animal. Like if I was to get a dog, right, I rescue a dog, and I say I love this dog so much, cuddle the dog and then cut their throat, I'd be arrested. But if I turn around and said, well, you know, I can love a pig and eat a pig, there's a moral schizophrenia is what we call it. You can't love animals and pay for them to be tortured, mutilated and killed. There is nothing morally different between eating a dog and eating a cow or eating a cat and eating a pig. They all feel and they all think and they all have the same right to live, and there is no moral distinction between any of them. So no, you can't love certain animals and eat certain animals. You either love animals or you don't.
I was also very lucky to do a video for Surrey Vegan Fair and was able to chat with Peter Egan from Downton Abbey. You may know him as Shrimpy.
My name is Peter Egan. I'm an actor. Been an actor for a long time, and I'm also an animal welfarist.
Have you been in anything recent that people would know of?
Yes, I was recently in two series of Unforgotten. I was in Downton Abbey. I was in Grantchester. Many years ago I was in a very famous series called Ever Decreasing Circles. I've been acting for over 50 years, so there's too many things to mention really.
Okay, quick question. In Downton Abbey you were, there was lots of scenes around tables, around food and stuff.
Yeah, I played a character called Shrimpy, and I insisted that all the food, as I do whenever I'm on location, because I'm a vegan, I insist that I don't have any animal-based food.
And how long have you been vegan for?
I've been a vegan specifically for 2 years. Longer than that in terms of a lifestyle, but in terms of a committed sense for 2 years. And I became a vegetarian about 8 years ago when I watched a film called Earthlings.
How do you feel about working animals, and in particularly like guide dogs and police dogs and horses and stuff like that?
Well, I think certainly in terms of guide dogs, sniffer dogs, police dogs, I think it's wonderful. I'm not entirely sure how I feel. I'm never really comfortable with people on horses. I think if I was a horse and someone said to me, "Can I put a saddle on you and train you to trot in the way I want you to trot and stop when I want you to stop, carry the loads I want you to carry, go in directions you may not want to go in." If I were a horse, I wouldn't like that very much. So I can't imagine horses like it very much either. So there is because dogs are naturally have grown, it's in their DNA to be companionable animals. And because they are used in so many creative ways in terms of our society, I mean, some people say that were it not for dogs, man might still be a hunter-gatherer, because they have actually looked after us for thousands upon thousands of years and alerted us to danger and led us to various things. And I'm a great supporter of a charity called Medical Detection Dogs, and they are trained to seek out cancers and things. So I think that's a very creative use of dogs in the workplace. I can't think of anything that would be more creative than that. So I would say, in general, I am against the use of animals in any other way, whether it be horse racing, circuses, zoos, donkey rides, photographs with monkeys, all of that kind of thing I think is shocking. I think that veganism, as I believe that animal welfare is the issue of this century, that is closely linked to the belief that veganism is going to be the future, as far as I'm concerned, in what is otherwise the slaughter industry, the most destructive, disgusting industry on the planet today.
So I decided to call up some farms. The 22 farms I contacted around the UK did not want to take part, or did not even reply back to my email. I then tried to get some information from slaughterhouses around the UK, the same again. So then I looked into butchers, and once again I emailed 11 butcher shops around London, and only 3 of them replied back, 2 of them saying they felt this was not something they wanted to do. Then, as I was losing hope, one owner of a butcher shop got back to me, and he said he'd be happy to chat with me. I must say, after all the hassle I'd had, the owner we spoke to was really nice. How long have you been a butcher for? And what's the hardest thing about being a butcher?
About 30 years now. I don't think it's a hard trade. There's lots of fun. It's rewarding. We get to work with good farmers and producers. It's a kind of great British tradition, I think. It's not a hard job. I would say probably there is no hard part. I came into it from a kind of backward stance. I was trained as a chef initially. I did a full apprenticeship, and at the end of the apprenticeship, I wanted to do something different. I think the full-time kitchen wasn't for me, and I moved into the butchery industry really.
Have you ever met any vegans?
Yes, I meet vegans all the time. They come into the shop, they shop for their families and friends. They're people, they're normal human beings. You know, how do you describe one person against another?
Have you seen any vegan demos before?
No, I haven't. I'm hearing in the news at the moment, it's fashionable, of course, or current rather than fashionable maybe. And yeah, it baffles me a little bit.
Where does your meat come from? And do you visit the farms?
We aim to have all British meat. We don't bring anything from the continent or further afield. Beef comes from Scotland, pork comes from the West Country, poultry comes from Essex and Gloucester. So from around Britain really. And we speak to our suppliers all the time. It's an important part of what we do to know what we're bringing in and to ensure that we're doing the best job possible for the customers. We need to know that the animals live well. We want to be free ranging. We want the animals to be in the field before they go to slaughter. There are some grey areas in farming where some animals are brought into sheds to finish their natural growth, as it were. But we like to know that the animals are going to slaughter from the fields. So from the slaughter, and again, slaughterhouses have far-reaching controls nowadays. So we know that the animals are killed as humanely as possible, as a word we used earlier. And then they're moved on to trucks and brought to the shop. Some of our meat goes through a third party. We do use producers as well, so we don't always get full carcasses. Sometimes the meat will have been broken down butchers, other production plants along the way.
If the whole world went vegan, what impact would that have on you and your business?
Well, it closes down. quite simply, there would be no butchery business. That's it's a kind of hypothetical if question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if the whole world went vegan, there would be no butchery industry.
Do you know how many animals are slaughtered each year in the UK?
No idea.
Would it interest you to know?
Gosh, yes. We want to learn. Every fact is interesting.
2.6 million cows, 10 million pigs, 14.5 million sheep, 80 million fish, and 950 million birds.
Okay. These are numbers, and what does that mean? We see headline numbers in the media all the time, and what does the number actually mean? We export a huge amount of meat from Britain around Europe and around the world, so some of those figures will be export. It won't all be home used. Some of them sound way out there. I'm not quite sure. When we start talking about bird numbers, we have to think about what we have. We have, of course, poultry, chickens, and ducks and guinea fowls and geese, turkeys at Christmas. But we also have a big game shooting industry in this country, which is respected for around the world. So when you start to look at it, it's very difficult to quantify the numbers. What do the numbers mean? But
How do you feel when you see vegans posting bad reviews on non-vegan shops?
The opinions start to cross. It's where it gets a bit grey or unpleasant. I respect a vegan, I respect a vegetarian, I respect the Muslims and the way they want to, or the Jews and the way they want to eat their food. We should all respect each other. I don't know why a vegan feels that they have the right to try to damage or hurt or stop somebody else's trade. That part seems to start to cross the line. And if I respect you or somebody, if I respect anybody to have the right to be a vegan, I don't see why they don't feel I have the right to sell meat.
Do you think meat is part of the food chain?
And some of it's pleasure, of course it is. We all need to eat, so it's fuel as well, of course. And of course it has a lot of the nutrients in it, a lot of good things, the proteins that we need to have. And if we don't take in those nutrients through meat, we need to have them anyway. So you get into the supplements within chemical supplements. So we have to have them.
Do you think meat is a cultural thing?
Yeah, of course, and that's around the world, and this comes into the culture of what we eat. We choose to eat cows in this country, and other countries choose not to eat cows. Some countries choose to eat dogs, we choose not to eat dogs, and it goes on and on. So yes, culture plays a lot in what any nationality eats, or any around all over the world. It's not just a British thing. A good modern butcher shop is we have the ability to buy. In Britain, most things we don't try to be something we're not. In Australia they eat kangaroo, and it is available in this country. We choose not to sell things like that. It's not what the British people want. We don't eat horse in this country. There's nothing wrong with it, and it is suitable in some environments, but we choose not to eat it in this country. So we would do our best to find anything for a customer they wanted, within reason.
How would you feel if dogs were sold in a butcher's shop?
I'd be disappointed. It's not, for me. It's not necessary, and this is where we all have our lines and our boundaries, and that's me being British. People around the world eat them. You kind of ask yourself, why not? But I would be disappointed. I wouldn't want to see that happening. I'm an animal lover, really. What it's meant to is it's just a thought process. It's absolutely a thought process, and it goes on. There's many things. We're here in Asia, things like eating monkeys, for example. I'd be distraught to think I was going to eat a monkey, but the butcher that you're going to interview in Asia would be distraught to think that you're going to eat a pig or a cow. So this is where your cultural question comes in. It is a cultural thing, and we have domestic pets in this country, our cats and our dogs and rabbits, and we choose not to eat them.
What does the word humanely mean to you?
I think it's kind of doing things properly. You know, we know that an animal is going to be born, a cow is going to be born, it's going to be looked after, it's going to be fed and watered, it'll exercise, and at some point it's going to go to slaughter. So to give that animal a good life and to make sure it's happy and healthy throughout its life, this is the best we can do. This is the humane way to treat an animal.
Do you think you could kill an animal yourself?
No, probably not. It's not something I've ever wanted to do. It's not part of the butchery that we live in today. Like everything else, and we were talking about humanely doing things or doing things properly. This is a skilled job. This is not just a case of taking a knife and stabbing something or cutting its throat. And that's when it all goes horribly wrong, unfortunately. And we see, we see TV chefs who are not qualified deciding that they should do this as part of their kind of birthright or whatever it is. And it's not. It's a skilled job, and we mustn't undermine the work that the slaughtermen do in abattoirs. So no, it's not something I'd be interested in.
So I asked you, the vegans, if you could ask a butcher a question, what would you ask? And here are some of your questions. How do you kill someone humanely who does not want to die?
I don't know. I have absolutely no idea how to answer a question like that, quite honestly. The thing is that if you go to a lamb slaughterhouse, it's well known that sort of lambs follow each other, and the way they do it is they kind of put the first lamb through into the process, and then the rest of the lambs follow through. So and I don't know. It's a completely different science to start having a discussion as to the animal's thought pattern when it's going to slaughter. It is a fact if an animal is scared when it dies, the adrenaline that flows through its body would damage the meat. So animals have to be calm when they're killed. So that in itself is a part of the skill of the slaughterman, is to calm the animals down. An animal that is frightened when it dies would not be good meat to eat.
Do you think it's a bit psychopathic having dead body parts and selling them?
No, it's not psychopathic at all. No.
Do you feel guilty for selling products that could potentially cause cancer?
I think it's a potential word. There's a proof missing, no.
Would you be happy chopping up cats and dogs?
No, it would not be okay, no.
Do you think we need to eat animals for health and protein?
Yes.
What do you think is the biggest challenge to you discontinuing your business and stopping you getting other income from elsewhere?
Well, the challenge is that I don't want to. I am the challenge. We're doing a good job that suits a huge percentage of the population. Along the way, you and I discussed what would happen if at some point in history the whole world became vegan. At that time, we would be dealing in that market. Realistically, if that were ever going to happen, there would be a swing from the vast majority of people that do eat meat, and at some point there would be a bigger majority of people that chose not to eat meat through vegetarianism or veganism. And veganism covers a lot more than just the meat side. I mean, vegetarian is kind of covering the meats already. By the time you get to vegan, you're travelling a long way down the line before we get a majority in this country, or in Britain, or the world.
Is there an animal you could not butcher?
Morally or professionally? Professionally, no. Morally, yes. We talk about what we call domestic pets in this country, and certainly, I would not be interested in butchering those kind of animals.
Have you noticed a rise in veganism?
I've noticed a rise in the popularity or the voice of vegans. They're making a lot of noise and they're getting their point across, which they're entitled to do. There's ways and means of doing everything, and I have no problem with vegans promoting what they want to promote. I mean, there's a place for everything in the world. And good luck to them if they want to do it. I think if it oversteps the line, as we discussed earlier, protesting or trying to damage people's businesses or their livelihoods or trolling people because they choose to eat meat, then actually you're overstepping the line. And I don't expect carnivores to actually decry veganism either. I don't. Good luck if that's what you want to do. live your life as you feel free.
Do you think vegans have their facts right?
My view is that everything should be had in moderation. We do need to have all sorts of nutrients to make our bodies work efficiently and properly. Meat has its place to play, as do vegetables and pulses and anything else. I don't know. It would be quite a bold comment just to say no, vegans aren't right, but at the same time I think there's pros and cons and everything, and I certainly don't think they're 100% right, but I wouldn't suggest they're 100% wrong either.
The next big event I was invited to was the Animal Rights March.
Tell us the event you've organised and why.
Yeah, so we've organised a big Animal Rights March here in London. The reason that we organised this march is a lot of marches for single issue campaigns, but we felt that there needed to be a march that encompassed all the different strands of animal rights activism, and also we want to garner like a sense of community and inspire vegans to become active, and we also just want to send like a message to the wider public and to the people in charge that the issue of animal exploitation is something that needs to be taken seriously.
So yeah, can you explain a little bit more why you do have the your throat cut like that? Because that's a bit unusual.
People can see this is what happens every day in slaughterhouses to innocent beings that don't want to die.
I must say it was loud and thousands of activists came from all over the UK. The event went really well. I must say I felt uncomfortable with people shouting at a food outlet with children in. Some people have never met a vegan and may not even know what vegan is.
Scum! 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 Meat is murder! You fucking scum!
I'd like to point out that just over 5,000 people attended the Animal Rights March, and this was only a small pocket of people from the march that was actually shouting at the restaurant. As an activist, I feel there will still be a fight for a vegan world. I do feel it, not if it will happen, but more of the case of when it will happen. I have met some amazing people over the time of making this documentary, vegans and non-vegans. I feel that the vegans need to speak and get their message across to people. I also feel that some meat eaters can be very rude to vegans and not take on board what they're saying. I'm not sure what the future holds for the vegans and non-vegans. All I do know is that there will be demos, and as an activist I can say that this is one of the movements I have seen some small changes and even big changes in. The last question we have to ask, will your future be a vegan one?